let's be honest, focus is hard enough on its own when you have an ADHD brain. But when you add in a chatty coworker or a partner who also works from home or an open office plan where everyone just assumes you're always available, that is next level distraction. So what's an ADHD brain to do? How can we kindly and clearly signal that we're just not open for interruptions all the time? Especially, how do we communicate that to someone that we really care about? Well, that is exactly what we're exploring on episode 302 of the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast. We are exploring why ADHD brains struggle with focus interruptions, why it's extra hard when the distraction is a person, and how we can build simple systems to protect our focus without shutting people out. So if this is something that you've been navigating, stick with me because we have a lot of great strategies to make this work for us. You ready? Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. How are you? I am so glad that you're here today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we jump into the topic, I first want to give a shout out to another busy, awesome listener. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, many of you have been so kind, so generous with your time by heading over to Apple Podcasts and leaving the show a 5-star review. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate this, because the more reviews that we have, the more the podcast shows up as a recommendation to new listeners with ADHD brains who are looking for strategies that actually work when it comes to getting things done with an ADHD brain. So seriously, thank you again. And today I want to shout out Adam, who left a 5-star review titled, "I always feel better." They write, "Listening to Paula helps me feel normal and equipped to work with my brain to be the person I want to be in the world. She gives me hope and tools." Thank you so much, Adam, for listening to the podcast, for writing this thoughtful review. Most importantly, thank you for showing up for you and for putting these tools to use. You, my friend, are busy being awesome. Thank you for being here. All right. As I mentioned in the intro today, we are talking about interruptions and how we can navigate interruptions with our ADHD brains. Now, this episode was inspired by a question from one of my clients a few weeks ago in my small group coaching program called We're Busy Being Awesome. And I thought her question was just so relatable that I had to turn it into a podcast episode as well. And she asked, while he isn't officially diagnosed, my husband also shows every sign of being part of the ADHD crowd. So here's the thing. We both work from home, which means a lot of random thoughts and verbal processing happening throughout the day. The problem is I have enough trouble focusing on my own. And more often than not, just as I finally drop into focus, he interrupts me to share something or ask for input. And since I never know when that rare focus window shows up, it's really hard to set clear boundaries or clarify when it's okay to interrupt me versus not. Any suggestions? So again, like I said, this is such a common experience. And while my client's question was about her life working from home with her husband, let me tell you, I hear this all the time in so many different settings, whether it's open office spaces, whether it's co-working environments, roommates, chatty colleagues who just love to pop their head in and say hello. Honestly, when I look back to my years in the university, especially before my diagnosis, I was that chatty coworker popping in to say hello because I was avoiding grading or whatever. Anyway, in today's episode, we're talking about how to navigate this. We're talking about why these interruptions are so challenging for ADHD brains, why they can be extra tough when they're from someone we care about, and also how we can support ourselves through it with some really simple strategies and some strong communication. So let's take a moment first to explore what's really going on when we get interrupted mid-task and why it can seem so tough to get back on track, because it's not just about someone popping in with that quick question. for ADHD brains, there's a lot happening behind the scenes that makes these seemingly little moments especially disruptive. So number one is task inertia. As we know, getting started is often hard enough. So once we do finally get going, we want to stay in motion. And interruptions break that momentum. And it can take a relatively long time, sometimes a really long time, to get back on track. So that can be challenge number one. Number two is our working memory challenge. Okay. So if we get pulled away mid-thought, there's a good chance, especially if you have a brain like mine, there's a good chance we're going to lose that thread entirely. It's not just where was I? It's more like, what was I even doing? What was I thinking about? That fragile train of thought can really disappear quite quick, especially if we don't get a chance to write it down. The third challenge is our time blindness, which I feel like I mention all the time in every episode. But you know what? It's here because it is an obstacle. When we are interrupted, it might seem like, okay, this is just going to take a minute. I'll be right back to work in 5 minutes or whatever. But time, as we know, is so slippery. And before we know it, we've been in a conversation for half an hour. And the task that we were once working on is like miles away. What was I even thinking about? Working memory again, right? Number 4 is kind of dopamine hijacking, if you will, because interruptions are often kind of interesting. Whether it's a funny story or some vent session or someone just wanting to connect, our brains tend to light up with that new thing. And if we're working on something that might otherwise be lower stimulation, let me tell you, that distraction is probably going to win almost every single time. The 5th obstacle is the unpredictability of those interruptions and getting stuck in waiting mode. So I don't know about you, but when I know that there's a possibility of being interrupted at any minute, my brain gets stuck in that waiting mode. If I can't predict when someone might pop in, but I do know someone might pop in, just the possibility of being interrupted can really prevent me from getting into focus mode. This was especially true for me when I would hold office hours as a professor. So I would have my door open. I knew that students might be dropping in. And because I knew that they might pop in, I could never drop into my writing because my brain was always scanning for whether or not a student might pop in or a colleague might have a quick question or whatever. The 6th obstacle is background noise in conversations. As we know, tuning things out isn't always easy, especially if we're in an open office plan and you have a real loud talker next to you. So even if we're not directly involved in that conversation, nearby chatter or noise can tug at our attention over and over and over again. And it's like we're trying to write a report or something with the television on or a news report playing, but really it's your colleague talking so loudly next to you. And those types of interruptions can also be an obstacle. And then number 7 is this sort of unspoken pressure that we put on ourselves to be available. So whether we are in an open office space or working alongside someone at home, there's often this unspoken expectation to quote unquote be available. And for many of us, simply saying something like, well, could we talk about this later? Can bring up guilt or fear of coming across as rude. So we pause our focus and sometimes we don't make it back. Okay, so those 7 reasons, there's probably more, but these are the 7 that came up in terms of focus and attention of why interruptions are so disruptive for our ADHD brains. But it's not just about our executive functions. It's not just about dopamine and working memory, because there's also quite often an emotional weight that comes with these moments too. Okay, so when we get interrupted mid-focus, or we're trying to protect our time or our space, there's often a whole lot of mixed emotions involved here, and they can catch us off guard. So interruptions, especially when they come from people we care about, people that we want to be friendly with, right? When we experience these interruptions, it can bring up frustration, guilt, even resentment, depending on what we're thinking about. And often we're trying to navigate all of this while just trying to finish a task. So let's talk about some of these emotional layers that do tend to show up. Let's name them. First and foremost, I mentioned it earlier, guilt. So many of us don't want to appear rude, and we make it mean that we're rude if we tell someone, can we talk about this later? Right? We don't want to let someone down. We want to be approachable. We want to be helpful, especially in office settings where there's pressure to be a quote unquote team player, or at home, you want to be a supportive partner or parent or whatever. So when we make that request, even if it is something as simple as, hey, could we talk about this a little bit later? For a lot of us, it can stir up guilt because we're telling ourselves things like, oh, I'm being rude. They're going to be disappointed. I'm not being helpful enough. I should be more supportive here. And because we're thinking these things and we're feeling that guilt, people pleasing tends to sneak in. And so we might say, oh yeah, sure, no problem. And we stop what we're doing before we even have a moment to think it through. And we do it just to avoid that uncomfortable feeling of guilt. Even when part of us knows we want to stay focused, the guilt can override that logic very quickly. There's also frustration, okay? That moment when we finally drop into focus and then someone interrupts us. Cue the frustration. We know how rare and precious those focus windows can be, especially on those tasks that are especially draining. It takes so much self-coaching, so much talking the toddler brain into doing some of that work. And then bam, the focus is gone because someone popped their head in. It's like they just come in and pop your focus bubble that we worked so hard to blow up. And if you're like me, most of the time, you know that person was not trying to interrupt you. It wasn't done out of ill intent. They didn't probably even know you were in focus. They certainly didn't know how hard you worked to get into flow. But when we're thinking to ourselves, oh, they shouldn't have done this. They should have known. They shouldn't have interrupted me. It's going to take me so long to get focused again. It shouldn't take me this long. All of these thoughts are arguing with reality, which is a key source of our frustration. And then finally, I mentioned resentment. So when these interruptions happen, often especially without any kind of acknowledgement, it's easy to let our brains start thinking that people don't care about us or care about our needs. It's easy to start thinking, why doesn't anyone even care? I always stop to help them. I always consider their schedules. Why don't they do the same for me? It's like they don't even see me. It's like they don't even care. Everyone else gets to share their thoughts. Everyone else gets to take up space and be heard. But when I need time to focus, it's negotiable. And as most resentment does, it quietly builds over time. And again, if you're like me, it can unintentionally leak out in other ways, like snarky comments or shutting down, withdrawing from conversations, sometimes without us even really fully realizing what we're doing or why we're doing it. And then there's also a twist on this, which is that we do this too. As I mentioned, I was often that chatty coworker who would pop in. Sometimes we are those chatty ones interrupting someone else's focus. Sometimes we are the one knocking on the door or popping our head into a meeting or sharing some random story mid-task. And I offer this simply because I find it to be a helpful reminder that we are all beautifully human, and it helps to release some of that tension. We all do this. We all navigate this. It reminds us that this isn't about blaming. It's about awareness. And when we understand what's happening, it becomes easier to create some systems that support everyone involved. Okay, so now that we've named the emotional side, that the guilt, the resentment, the frustration, and even those moments when we are the interrupters, what do we do with this? How can we support ourselves in a way that protects our focus, but also honors our relationships and gives our brains that structure and clarity that it craves? So this is where we're going to turn to our strategies, all right? And not some rigid one-size-fits-all system. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that's not my style. Instead, we're going to talk about some flexible, realistic supports that we can experiment with so we can find what actually works for each of us, because each of us might need a different approach. Because the truth is, we might not always know when focus is going to strike, but when it does, we want to be ready to protect it. Before we talk about those specific strategies, however, I want to make sure that you signed up for my free course on boosting your focus and concentration, because let's be honest, we all know that feeling when our busy brains are pulling us in a million directions and thinking about everything except the one thing we want to focus on. So whether it's a big project or daily tasks or just trying to stay present, it is no secret that ADHD can make concentration incredibly challenging. And that's where my free course comes in. In it, I share my 6 favorite strategies to boost your focus and concentration, which I divide into bite-sized 3 to 5 minute actionable videos. In fact, you can learn them all in about 30 minutes. And then you can dive in and start implementing the strategies that feel most supportive for your brain. So if you are ready to start supporting your focus, you can sign up for the free course right now at I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/focus or tap through the link in the show notes and start working with your ADHD brain today. All right. Let's walk through a few ADHD-friendly options that you can try, whether you are working from home, you have super chatty coworkers, or you deal with the dreaded open concept office. All right. So strategy number 1 is creating some sort of do not disturb signal. Sometimes the simplest strategies are the most effective. And I know for myself and many ADHD brains, we love very clear external cues. And I think that visual signals are a great way to say, hey, please hold that thought, without needing to actually say, please hold that thought. So some sort of visual signal for do not disturb. It could be wearing noise canceling headphones, and they're both a cue and a sound blocker, which is awesome. But when they're on, it cues to whoever's around, you're in focus mode. Or maybe you have a small desk light, and when it's red, you're in focus mode. When it's green, you're open for a chat. Or a simple sticky note, or you fold a note card in like a triangle, so it can just stand upright, that says in focus mode, check in at 1 or whatever. Maybe it's simply having your door open or closed, or setting your Slack or Teams or Zoom status to deep work, checking messages at 2. Okay. What matters most here is clear communication of what these cues mean. Let the people around you know what the signal means and when you'll reconnect. So when I've got on these headphones, or when the light is on, or when I have my door closed, I'm in the zone, but I will check in when I'm done, or I'll check in at 3. Strategy 2 is having a catch-all for thoughts. Okay. Some people, again, especially those of us with ADHD, need to offload our thoughts kind of the moment we have them. Otherwise, our working memory checks out, the thought is gone. But we can support that need for communication without sacrificing our focus. So we could try creating some sort of catch-all system where the thoughts can safely land. Maybe it's a shared Google Doc or a Notion board or a Slack channel for non-urgent questions. Maybe you have a whiteboard or a notebook near your office space, or a voice memo app. You use Voxer or WhatsApp or something like that for those quick ideas. This way, the person can still express what they need and you get to stay focused. And vice versa. If you have the idea, you can write it there and know that there's a time when you two can connect. And then again, make sure that there's clarity on when you will check the list or when the team will check the list, so that it doesn't feel like these ideas are just going into a black hole to die. Okay. We want to make sure that we know, I'll be checking this around this time. Tip 3 is setting these dedicated check-in times. So what I have found is that people are much less likely to interrupt if they're not stuck in waiting mode, wondering when or even if they'll ever hear from you. When people know when they're going to get your attention, it's often easier to wait. Certainly it is for me. So at home, you might tell your partner, let's check in over lunch, or let's catch up at 4. Or at work, you might say, I'll be heads down from 9 until 11, but I'm open after that if anything comes up. For virtual spaces, again, this is where you can use auto replies or Slack statuses to really reinforce those focus blocks. Even setting 10 to 15 minute chat windows in the afternoon or virtual office hours like Cal Newport talks about to reduce those mid-task interruptions. The fourth strategy is clarifying emergency versus non-emergencies. So although our ADHD brains really struggle with this, we also know on some level that not all interruptions are created equal. And sometimes, just like us, other people honestly don't know what is urgent unless we spell it out. So an effective strategy can be to co-create a list of what is actually urgent and what's not with your team or your roommate or your family. So urgent might be the house is on fire, someone's locked out, a time-sensitive decision can't move forward without you. Not urgent. You got to see this meme. I had this random thought about our vacation. Did you order oat milk? At home, you might have a filter. Like, if it's something that can wait 30 minutes, can we jot it down in our shared doc and talk about it at lunch? Or at work, you might try, if it's urgent, definitely ping me if it falls in that urgent category. But if not, let's add it to the team agenda or check in during office hours. And then number 5, knowing when to focus on interruption-friendly tasks instead, because sometimes interruptions are just going to happen. Whether it's your 5-year-old who's home from kindergarten or a high-traffic office space, or it's the week before finals and you're holding office hours and they are packed, it's just not always realistic to expect those long, uninterrupted blocks of time. So instead of fighting that constantly, we can work with it. And we can do that by saving lower focused tasks for those high interruption times. So this might be organizing your digital files, decluttering those, unsubscribing from your emails in your inbox, reviewing notes, brainstorming ideas, and then block off your quieter times, whenever that happens to be, for the deep creative work that does need more focus. So here's the thing. We're probably not going to eliminate every interruption, right? And that's okay. If we eliminated every interruption, it would mean we didn't have people around, which, I mean, admittedly can be nice at times, but not forever. Most of us want some level of connection. It is a basic need. So if we are maintaining connection with people we love, interruptions are going to happen. Life is life. People will still pop in. Thoughts will still pop out of our heads. But that doesn't mean we have to be powerless to the interruptions. There are ways that we can work with these moments instead of fighting against them. There are ways that we can protect our focus and stay connected to those people around us. And when we approach this with curiosity, with self-compassion, and making just one small change at a time, that is where the magic happens. So if any of this episode resonated with you, whether it was the frustration that you experience when getting pulled out of focus or the people-pleasing guilt that sneaks in when you try and set a boundary, I first want you to know you're not alone. And also, there are tools that can work for you. So try one strategy this week. Maybe it's headphones indicating you're in focus mode. Maybe it's setting a check-in time with your roommate. Maybe it's just catching yourself the next time that you interrupt someone else's focus and asking yourself, is this urgent or could this wait until our 3:00 meeting? Start small, allow yourself to experiment and adjust, because that is how we build the systems that stick. We build them with flexibility, not perfection. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you are ready to take these concepts and apply them to your life, if you're ready to learn how to support your ADHD in a way that works best for you, I invite you to check out today's show notes where you can learn more about how we can work together, both in my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome, and through one-on-one coaching. Also, if you know someone who struggles with interruptions, would you be a rock star and share this episode with them? You could send it to them in a text message or snap a screenshot and share it on your Instagram stories. Whatever you do, please know that I so appreciate you for tuning in and for helping me get these strategies to even more busy, awesome brains who need them. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.